Hey everybody, this is Jason Ostrowski, and welcome to another edition of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. Today's podcast episode is titled Healthy Work Habits, Perpetual Growth, and Balance Over Burnout, a Mind, Body, Spirit approach to real estate. And the reason why I think this is an important topic for us to cover today is that as realtors, especially in the market that we've been in, we tend to make big sacrifices in our lives in order to get the job done. Sometimes those sacrifices can lead to a loss of time with family and friends, with your children. It can lead to burnout. You can feel overwhelmed. So today we're going to find a better path. We're going to work on that together with my special guest, Frank May, Vice President and Sales Manager of our Haverford office. And Frank's been in the business over 27 years, and he practices a very mindful approach not only to business, but to life. So today we're going to get Frank's wisdom on the subject, get his unique perspective, and we'll pick it up on the other side. So I'm lucky to have Frank May on the podcast today. And Frank, you and I have a great topic to cover today. And it's something that's near and dear to your heart. We're going to get into healthy work habits, perpetual growth, and balance over burnout, a mind, body, spirit approach to real estate. My first question to you: what have you discovered along the way in your 27 years in real estate that makes the mind, body, spirit connection to real estate so important?
Wow, that's a great question. What have I discovered along the way that makes this so important to me? It started a long time ago, I guess, probably when I was in the 10th grade. A very special English teacher that I had introduced my class to mindfulness meditation. And I'm still very much in touch with that same high school English teacher. I call her one of my gurus. And, I think that tapping into the ability to focus your mind, to be a little bit more aware of life other than just making money and running around like a chicken with your head cut off. That was really one of the pivotal things for me. I got very lucky to be introduced to mindfulness meditation at a very young age.
I'm on the same wavelength as you. I probably have not been practicing nearly as long, and I certainly find myself days where I'm not doing it. I'm not as consistent as I would like to be. But I agree with you wholeheartedly that I try to do some meditation as much as I possibly can, because it helps to keep me grounded. It helps to relax me in this stressful environment that we always find ourselves in.
Can I just dovetail off one thing you just said? The whole practicing thing. I think that some people might get a little stressed out about, am I even practicing? What does that mean? And I have a friend who's a Buddhist teacher, and he said, how's your practice coming? I said, not that great. I haven't really been doing much. I've been actually hiking a lot with my dog. This was during COVID. We're getting out all the time. He's like, that's your practice. If you're getting out and doing something like that. So I don't want anybody to get overwhelmed with, I've got to sit like a yogi on a cushion or, fold my legs like a pretzel that I can barely, do. So, I just want to make sure people realize this is something that's very accessible for everyone.
One of my best things I used to do as a teenager, I used to be on the ride mower cutting my grass, and I would just zone out. And I just loved it. And I never really kind of put two and two together that's kind of my practice, right? That's kind of my time to just think
Absolutely.
Find that zen. So, Frank, how can agents approach each day to be more consistent and more efficient in order to maximize their time and therefore get better results for themselves?
To be consistent and efficient to produce better results really starts with having a plan and having a little bit of a program. And it doesn't have to be something that you follow strictly every day. But it's important to have some sort of a map for your day. I'm not a big fan of like following something ritualistically, because then if you don't follow it, now my day is going to be messed up. I didn't do exactly what I'm supposed to do every day. But I think having a plan for each day is really important. And there has to be a period where you have that break for thought and concentration, for some type of physical exercise and health. It doesn't have to be in the morning. It can be in the middle of the day. It can be in the evening. It can be whatever you want it to be. So there has to be these periods where you know you're going to break for some personal time. And you have to look at your day like, okay, here's what I do every morning when I get into the office. Here's what I do in the afternoon. Here's what I do in the evening. So I think it's important to have some type of a schedule. That's very important, having a schedule to follow.
I am right in line with your way of thinking because to me, I get up every day, and I have mentioned this before. I try and get the three most important things done in my day every day. I would, make sure that I get those done before I get anything else done. And they can change, right? Those pillars are going to change. If one day I need to make sure that I do X, Y, Z as soon as I get up, I'm going to do that and accomplish that. And like you said, sometimes maybe I'll exercise in the morning. Sometimes I'll do it in the afternoon. It will change up sometimes. But I try and get those important items that are important to me in my life done first and then kind of go from there. Do you agree with that sentiment?
I agree with that completely. And what those important things are might be a little bit different to each person. And it also depends on how you operate. For me, the first thing that I need to do is I need to take care of my mind. I like to wake up. These days, I like to listen to some light classical music as soon as I wake up. I like to go to the gym and I kind of habit stacking is something that will, our conversation, I think, is going to be kind of circular, Jason, because these things lead into not burning out. It's all kind of goes around in a circle. So the habit stacking that I do is, lately I've been riding the recumbent bike and I read on the Kindle app that's on the recumbent bike at the gym. So, but that's it for right now. It can change up. But for me, the most important thing is putting my mind into a positive state as soon as I wake up. So then I can go attack the other pillars of important things in my life, such as, dealing with what's urgent, having some time for, personal development on the business front. So I agree with you. And you're also talking about the eat that frog concept, which might be one book I left off of my reading list, but it's another really important one. So absolutely, and leaning into something hard, doing something hard the beginning of the day. David Goggins kind of haunts me when I wake up in the morning. He says, if you hit the snooze button, you've started your day with a fail. So as I'm kind of waking up and I'm still a little tired, he's in my head like, get up, man, get going, So that's why I think it's important to sort of have a little bit of a routine and have some people in your head that are pushing you to be your best.
Well, that's great stuff because we're going to get into your book list a little bit later in this episode because I want to hear, some of the books that you recommend. You mentioned habit stacking. I'm a huge fan of Atomic Habits. Just a great book to kind of discover ways to stack your habits, make it rewarding, kind of get into that routine that you talk about, but not too rigid. It's very rewarding to wake up and do these things and get into that kind of flow each day. You mentioned the snooze button. That is one that I'm going to need to take to heart, but great stuff overall. And I want to touch upon the importance next of growth. And we talked about growth and continual growth. Continual growth may be in our business. It may be outside of our business. What can you share regarding your personal experience in developing a growth mindset and the intention to cultivate personal growth into your life? You talked about, one of your gurus and very early on finding that meditative state in your life. What has it meant to you to have that growth mindset?
Sure. So, having the growth mindset, I think, first of all, it requires a sense of compassion towards yourself. Just because you want to grow and you want to change things, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you right now. So I think in sort of lightening up on yourself and not trying to feel this growth is like, I got to do this and I'm gripping it with tight fist. It's, I want to move in this direction. So the first thing starts with a sort of a desire to want to continue to change. The change is one of the only constants in our world and in our life. And I think it starts with a little bit of a desire to keep the ball rolling forward. So that's one of the things that's sort of the foundation of continual growth. I think it also requires a sense of curiosity. Like, what else is out there? What else could I be experiencing? How else could I be better at helping other people and serving other people? So a lot of it also comes from a place of being unselfish and focusing on how can I do more for other people, and that sort of will pull you into the direction of continual growth. And lastly, I think it's also, a feeling of pride in what you're doing, and wanting, having that desire to be better so that I can feel great about myself, because I'm continuing to evolve as a person, on many levels. So I think a lot of those, concepts kind of go into continual growth. One of the books that I liked, 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth by John Maxwell. And one of the concepts that really stuck out in that was what he called the law of the lid. Recognizing, like, what is your lid right now? What is the limiting factor that's stopping you from growing? And if you can learn to have an awareness of watching out for that and being able to lift that lid, you can continue to push forward and grow in any direction that you want to.
Yeah, Maxwell's got some great stuff. He's got a great podcast. We had Chris Godey on one of our earliest podcast episodes. He's from the John Maxwell School, so he really practices what he preaches. He was a very impressive individual, and he always has great information. So, I totally agree with what you're saying. For me, it's like I just have in a loop in my mind all the time: strive to be better every day, and that could be an inch by inch, percent by percent, evaluation each day. But I always want to focus on growing as, number one, a human being first, and then growing in my business, right? So what can I do today to help me grow for tomorrow? And like you said, it's not something that you have to be so rigid about and put so much pressure on yourself. You said, I want to move in this direction. And I really love that phrase, because it's not all about beating yourself up, right? It's about finding that space to grow and allowing yourself that space to grow. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that 1,000%. And I also have to preface a lot of what we're talking about by saying I'm not original at all. I'm just regurgitating stuff that I read or listened to or picked up along the way. Back to the Eagles, Jalen Hurts, 1% better every day. You know what I mean? So I believe in that a lot, so just, inching forward, just keeping that forward momentum. So I agree with what you're saying. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think as agents, a lot of times we want to make that huge leap, right? We want to make that huge leap in our business every year if we can. I mean, obviously, who wouldn't want to in our business make the leap from, let's just say you're doing, 5 million a year, and all of a sudden you want to leap to 10 million, right? That incremental change really is where it's at, in my opinion. Yeah, sure. Can we do that? Absolutely, we can do that. But if you just make that incremental change in your business, do that extra thing each day, to try and get yourself to that next level, that's really where it's at. That growth mindset, and just doing just a little bit more, expanding your horizons a little bit more, bit by bit, will eventually get you to that place that you want to be. I actually was telling a team member of mine, I recently just started a team, and I was telling this team member that, and I reference ninja selling on here a lot. And I went out to Colorado and took Larry Kendall's ninja selling course in Colorado. And one of the first things that they did, they had us write down on this little yellow card how much money we have to make per year in order to have, say, set aside money for an investment, and set aside money for a rainy day, and set aside money here. And when you added all that up, that's how much money you needed to make each year in order to basically, fulfill your dreams, right? And that number for me a long time ago was almost like pie in the sky, right? I'm like, how am I ever going to make this much money? This is crazy, And it took me years, but eventually over time and with that growth, I did fulfill that dream, and I did make that much money. And it was very fulfilling to me to know that you kind of scaled that mountain and you got there, and now I look to do that consistently, if not a little bit more. And it's you look back once you're, on top of that mountain, you scaled that mountain, you look back and realize, it was all about growth and getting there, you know?
Well, you mentioned something else in what you just said that's an extremely important component, and that's coaching and mentorship. You know, with the mindset that we're talking about, continuing to just kind of inch forward. But, Joe Nigo, who was with Brian Buffini, said, think like a hunter, work like a farmer. So there is potentially these bigger advances on the horizon, and part of that goes back to the mindfulness of letting go of expectations and letting go of any limiting beliefs. Don't put a limit on what your vision is, but working with other people is really important. Having coaches, having mentors. I was very fortunate early on in my career, the way things just worked out. I sat at a desk in the bullpen. There were computer terminals to my left and right, and two of the best realtors, in my opinion, in the business in our market flanked me on either side, and I just sucked up as much of them as I possibly could. And I think that also takes a little bit of humility. You got to acknowledge I'm not the be all end all, and I need to seek coaching. I need to synergize with other people, which is actually one of the reasons I think working in an office is one of the best things that you can do. Again, very early on in my career, one of my first mentors, a broker at my first office, said, I really think you should work in the office just for that synergy. This was a small office with basically like one desk in the back. I was there every single day.
It's all about first rule, show up, right?
Mm-hmm.
That important. I think that's something that unfortunately younger agents, not through any fault of their own, had lost during the pandemic when, a lot of people were working from home. We were forced to work from home. We were virtual. You mentioned soaking up what's around you. And I happened to be surrounded early in my career with the same type of agents where those mentors and those people that I admired, I really just soaked up as much as I possibly could, and it was invaluable to my business. And so, for you younger agents out there, the 80-20 rule, right? We find that most of those people that show up every day, they're the ones that are doing business in the office. You have that core group of agents that always show up in every office. And typically those are the ones that are going to do the business. And it's by no accident. It's that they're there every day, talking to people, doing their work, treating their business like a business, and they soak up what's around them. That helps them to become better agents and, really take their job very seriously. Do you agree with that, Frank?
I agree with that. Absolutely, Jason. And I think that for agents who are new in the business, I hope that they get something out of this podcast. And for agents who want to take their business to the next level, same thing, because I think if you get into, this flow state, this is not some crazy pie in the sky concept. It's if you show up every day, if you listen, if you check your ego at the door, you can really grow in your business. And you'll find that if you just keep your feet moving, things tend to happen. So that consistency of doing this every day. Okay, now we're back to the beginning. I have a program. Maybe I'm not following it exactly, but I'm just going to keep at it day after day, keep my vision as wide, my field of vision as wide as possible. And exactly what you just said. I agree.
Yeah. And, I want to mention this because this, again, flows into the next topic that we're going to cover. The one place, and I don't want to act like it's all pie in the sky, because one place that I often struggle with is balance over burnout. And that's what we talk about. I was just talking to someone the other day, and I was feeling a little burnout. I personally tend to say yes to people too much. Sometimes no is a good thing, right? Same way that sometimes saying yes is a good thing. But I tend to say yes to people because when I talk to people, I get excited and I immediately want to jump into the arena with whatever I'm being invited to do. And I take too much on at one time, and I leave myself susceptible to feeling overwhelmed and at times, of course, burn out. So for all the agents out there trying to find balance in this particular market, it can certainly drive us a little nuts right now. It makes us feel a little anxious, often stressed out. And of course, it can make us feel burnout. So, Frank, what do you recommend agents focus on to obtain better balance in their business and therefore their lives?
Sure. I think the first thing is taking a look at your communication style with your clients. The first thing is establishing how you communicate with your clients. We've heard the saying, meet them where they're at. So I want to understand, first of all, how does my client communicate? Because if we're not communicating effectively with each other, it leads to confusion, misunderstandings, and that's one of the things that just causes that angst and is one of the first factors in leading to burnout. I also like to establish the way that I communicate with my clients. And I always tell people, listen, if anything is urgent, please call me. I say ring the bat phone. That only lands with so many people. I might have to change that up for younger people who don't know what the bat phone is. But it's that emergency line that you can reach me, quickly. I see the missed call. I understand this is some type of an urgent communication. Email for exchanging information and facts. Text messaging for me is affirming and negating things. Sometimes, again, communicating non-urgent things. Don't text me over and over again. Hey, I need to do this. I need to do that. I got to see this house. That's a phone call for me. So it's important that I establish how I communicate with my clients, how I would like them to communicate with me, so we can communicate effectively and avoid any frustration just based on that. I really dislike playing phone tag with people. So I'm a big fan of a text message. Hey, are you available to speak at such and such time? If not, what time is good for you? I'm not texting people, hey, I'm in the office today, give me a call. And now they call at the same exact time I'm on the phone with somebody. It's just annoying for me. I'm also a little maniacal about using the Google Calendar. You can use any calendar that you want, but if I have even a brief conversation with somebody, I'm sending a calendar invite. And it's on my calendar. Now I get busy working on something, I have that little reminder ding. I have a phone call in 5 minutes with so-and-so. So that's another thing where I'm trying to, be organized with the tasks that I have regarding the communication, so things aren't slipping through the cracks. If my clients are frustrated, chances are I'm going to be frustrated. So the other thing that I think about is disappointment is a function of expectation. I need to manage client expectations, and sometimes that means having the guts or the grit to tell them something they might not like to hear. But it's my job to do that. Doctors have to deliver some very difficult information. I respect what they do, and I'm glad that I don't have to carry the burden of what some doctors do. So, but it's important. So, hey, whatever I'm going to tell them that's difficult is not as difficult as a life and death decision. So I need to stand up and accept my fiduciary obligation to that client and honor that by telling them difficult things sometimes and helping to manage their expectations. So that also prevents my clients from being frustrated, so I'm not being frustrated. And lastly, I often will tell my clients, I might work 7 days a week, but I don't work 24 hours a day. So I sort of establish what my working hours are, but I tell them, listen, you can call me and text me 24 hours a day, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. If tied up, I'm with another client, or if it's outside of my general working hours, I'm usually available till about 8 p.m. every evening. If we have some urgent matter, we're negotiating a deal, we're up against a deadline, absolutely, I'm going to be available until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, if that's what it takes. But generally, we'll know in advance if that situation is likely to arise, so I can manage that. And I guess I do have one other last thing, Jason. For me, you talked about doing the most important things first thing in the morning. And so I'm not checking my email 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 a.m. In the evening before I shut it down, I look for anything urgent. I take care of myself in the morning. I start looking at email around 7:30 or 8 a.m. after I've had a little mental space. So if I'm constantly, looking at emails, while I'm already shut down for the night and going to sleep, or trying to get my routine in the morning. That really makes me go a little haywire. So those are some of the things that I think can help avoid burnout.
Well, I listen to you and I almost envision you as the good angel on my shoulder, right? Because you're mirroring basically everything that I want to do that I'm not perfect with. But I will tell you, like you had said, one of the biggest things that I think we can ever do in our business, one of the most important things is, like you had said, set the expectation. Set the expectation for everything. Have that conversation with your clients in advance, because when there are surprises, when your clients are surprised, that's when there's problems, right? So you lay out everything in advance. And like you said, I try and tell my clients I'm available 9 to 9. That's just, remember that you can text me anytime.
Mm-hmm.
You can call me anytime, but just realize that I'm trying to work from 9 to 9 each day. And I'm getting back to you the next day. But you mentioned, like, when you have an emergency, of course, we might be talking at 11 o'clock at night if we have an agreement to be signed and the response date is today. Of course we're going to talk and get that done within our time frame, right? Time is of the essence. But outside of that, I'm 9 to 9. And you had mentioned, like, email. I don't want to get up and immediately start looking at my email each day. I want to have that routine where I give myself the space to wake up. Actually, before I get into that arena of answering business emails or being stressed out about something, I want to prepare myself, get into the routine of not doing that every day, because then you get sidetracked and that takes away from my 3 pillars every day that I would do. Right. So find a space to kind of carve out. And then the last thing I'll say is, I am so with you with my Google Calendar. That means everything to me. If it's not on my calendar, then I will completely forget. And I am horrible with things outside of my Google Calendar. So please, if we are working together, please send me an invite, like Frank said. that will do a lot of good for the both of us.
And I have my family on the Google Calendar as well. And I tell my wife, if we have a social obligation, please create a calendar invite and send it to me. My children know that my children are hooked up to our Google Calendar as well. So, it just makes life easy. I don't know. That's me.
Does. And a lot of times I just go where I'm told. So if Van sends me an invite and I just accept it, I just go,
Amen, brother.
Piggybacking off of that, what do you consider to be good balance in your own life? Like, how do you know you're, like, in that zone of good balance?
I think it's easier to recognize when you're not in the zone of good balance. Like, these things start popping up. For me, it's, am I behind in a certain area? If I'm not keeping up as quickly as I need to, say, on email, okay, I need to adjust my routine. I need to have a little, time blocking is another big thing. And I need to add to those time blocks sometimes if I'm not able to keep up in one area or another. I'm getting a little grouchy or feeling run down. I might just need to get a little more sleep. I might need to recognize that, what, I need to shut it down a little early tonight. So I'm a big proponent of healthy sleep, and that's really important for me and my mind state. Each person might have a little different trigger. Don't starve yourself and get hungry and hangry at work. Take a break, get something to eat. It's okay. So a lot of these things really factor into your mentality. If reading and listening to audio is the big thing for me. And I find that, so realtors sometimes live a lonely existence. If you're working at home and you're not coming into the office, if you're a very busy agent and you're on the road showing houses, they say you become a combination of the people you spend the most time with. So especially when I was, working more in a sales capacity than a management role where I'm at now, I would say, okay, who am I hanging out with today? All right, I want to hang out with Stephen Covey and learn the 7 habits of highly effective people. I want to hang out with John Maxwell. I want to surround myself with these great people. So, but your question was how can you recognize? I think you kind of just feel it, or if you are charting your success by doing measurable activities, and you see that you're not achieving the success you need in one area, or it's really important to track the lead measures. How many phone calls did I make today? Did I get out to lunch or have coffee with someone this week? Did I write some note cards? Whatever it is that you're doing on the front end, if you're seeing that, you're starting to slip in one of those areas, it's time to just forgive yourself, make the adjustments, and keep moving forward.
That's a great answer. I mean, I guess, like you said, how do I know that I've achieved balance in my own life? I think it's just like what you said. I find myself in a space where I'm content. I think it's contentment. When I'm not content, you kind of know when you're not. I do feel like it's important to kind of take an internal kind of like measurement of yourself, almost like your temperature, right? And where am I? And what do I need to do? What do I need to work on to get back into that space if I'm not there now? And you would mention, I know this is a big thing for you. And so you're a big audio book guy. I'm a big podcast guy. I'm a big book guy as well. I want to get into some of your favorite books now before we get out of here, because you had mentioned a lot of books that I love. So Frank, what are some go-to books, for whatever purpose, whether it's business purposes, whether it's life purposes, whether it's both together, what are your go-to books?
Sure. And when I put this list together for you, it's probably going back 15 years or more. So I'm going to start with one that just, it really impacted me. And a lot of these I stole from Brian Buffini when I took the Peak Producers class many, many years ago. And One Small Step Can Change Your Life, The Kaizen Way by Robert Maurer. And that's something that, it's interesting. There's some historical anecdotes in there about the way that we essentially use the continual improvement philosophy to increase productivity and production when car plants were turned into manufacturing plants for different things and helped us win World War II. But the thing that I really like in there is this fact that certain thoughts go through a part of your brain called the amygdala, which controls the fight, flight, and freeze response. So when you're thinking of tackling a really large task, you get hung up, analysis paralysis, that kind of sets in. But if you break something down into a really small, minuscule task, for me, I use this almost daily when I'm overwhelmed with cleaning up the kitchen after dinner. And I say to myself, I'm just going to put one glass in the dishwasher, and the rest kind of just goes from there. A friend of mine says you just have to get the first domino to fall. So that's one. Do you want me to jump into another one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Helmstetter was a big one for me. You have to really be aware of internal dialogue. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Every time I tried to read that, I started falling asleep. I couldn't get through it. I did it on the audio over a period of several weeks. I'm a little bit of an auditory learner. I was a professional musician before I got into real estate. So I really digest that stuff. And habit number 7, sharpen the saw, kind of what we've been talking about today, continual improvement, taking some time for yourself. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, another one I love on audio. It's, just really rolls a lot of evergreen perpetual concepts into that book. There was a really important TED Talk by Sean Achor called The Happy Secret to Better Work that was extremely impactful to me, and talks about, if you can cultivate a happy mind, you can be much more effective. And he talked about keeping a gratitude journal. So I've been journaling for years. I do it on a daily basis. There's been a few periods of what I call my blackout periods where I just stopped doing it for a while. And those were not the best times in my life. It's interesting. So it started as I want to write down 3 good things that happened to me yesterday. I like to do it in the morning. So I'm starting with that. And then it kind of goes from there, and it's grown into a lot of self-reflection, taking notes. We didn't talk about this earlier, but I think journaling is really important. You'll hear so many successful people talk about the importance of journaling, and that's a big thing for me. So those are a few of the top ones that come to mind for me right now. And if I had to pick just a few, those are the ones that I'm leaning on.
I mean, you mentioned the 7 Habits. That book was really spoke to me, and I know you fallen asleep during it. I actually have a colleague of mine. We read it at the same time. She didn't get out of it what I got out of it, but for whatever reason, it just absolutely spoke to me. Same with, we had mentioned Atomic Habits earlier. That really spoke to me. There's certain books that just the Go-Giver. There's things to reach all of us, right? And we have to find out what those are. Even like Sun Tzu, right? I at a time in my life, I did a ton of reading. You and I spoke kind of off camera about this, that I went through some health struggles in my life. And I said, well, how can I better myself while I'm sick? And I used to read all the time and used to try and mix things up with kind of like, a self-improvement book, and then I'd read like a nonfiction book, and then I'd read a scientific book. I was big into astronomy. I used to read astronomy, physics books. I always gravitated, towards those growth style books, because I felt like when I get better, then, I'm going to hit the ground running. And I also felt you mentioned journaling. At that time in my life, I was journaling every day. And honestly, I don't think I would have got through that period in my life without journaling. It got me through everything. I still have the journals. I mean, we're talking like 20 years later.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I have like 22 journals filled with stuff, not more. Maybe it's like 25 number, but I used to do it every single day, like you mentioned. And so I think those are really important topics to hit in, some really good books for us to start with for people that are listening out there. I know I'm going to read some of the ones that you mentioned that I haven't read yet, so I'm looking forward to that. So, okay. So I want to ask you one last question, because the serious musician that you are, and I'd be silly not to have you on the podcast and not talk about, your music side. All right. So you've done some pretty cool stuff with some pretty famous people. So who is your all-time favorite musician or band, and why? And who is the coolest person you ever got to play with?
Okay. So my all-time favorite music group is a group called Fish. I've been listening to Fish for a very long time. The coolest person I think I ever got to play with was Donald Byrd. He's a Grammy-winning Blue Note jazz musician, and when I played in the jazz program in college, I had a chance to play with him. So I think he's one of the biggest legends. I did tour the country nationally with a group that won the Grammy for Best Rap Album called Diggable Planets, and that was also quite an experience.
Well, I'm sure Ann has had to have told you how much she loves the Diggable Planets. Did this at some point in time?
No.
Oh my God, well, first of all, I love Diggable Planets, and I think they're coming to concert actually pretty soon to the area, if I'm not mistaken. We are going to get tickets.
Absolutely. I was communicating with one of the guys from the group because their hit song "Rebirth of Slick" was on an episode of Ted Lasso season 3. So I reached out and he hit me right back, and the reason I originally played music was because I wanted to promote peace and love and racial harmony. And one of my biggest goals was to be a minority in a large group. And that was absolutely the case with Diggable Planets, especially when we were on the road. I wanted to tour the country in real style, and we did. Our tour bus belonged to the Backstreet Boys before our management company took it, and I played 36 states over a period of 42 days. And when I was done, I was like, check, please. I'm ready to move on and settle down with my beautiful wife. And shortly thereafter, I got started in real estate. So,
Frank, that is so cool, man. And that's got to be grueling, I'm sure. Like, so when you're on tour, just a quick question. When you're on tour, like, I know some people are, that rock and roll lifestyle, right? And how do you maintain that? Like, how do you take care of yourself when you're on tour? Like, when you're in a different state almost every single day, it's got to be so tiring. How do you do that?
It's not easy. And I refer to it, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And that's kind of why, and the lifestyle thing is kind of why I got out of it ultimately. I got to a point where I played at a very high level. I've toured, recorded, and performed with five different Grammy-winning artists, the most famous being Usher. I recorded some didgeridoo for Usher, which is one of my main instruments, along with the electric and upright bass. But yeah, it got to be a grind. We didn't have any roadies, so I'm lugging my gear in and out. And our sleep schedule got to be you wake up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when the bus pulls into the next town. You eat breakfast at a Denny's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you kind of just go from there. So again, you have to adjust your sleep schedule. For me, I took advantage of that national tour to get out and see some really beautiful parts of the country by taking sidebar, hikes in Oregon and Montana and things like that. But it's not an easy lifestyle. One of the guys that I played with is in the Grammy-winning group War on Drugs. And I played in a group with him back in the day, Robbie Bennett, the keyboard player. But he's been able to manage it because he always took care of his health. He was not a party animal. He's also a family man and has children. So if you really want to succeed at a high level, it's about the music. It's not about the riffraff,
So with that said, since you played with Usher, are we going to see a surprise cameo, Frank Didgeridoo, at the Super Bowl halftime show this year?
I wish. Unfortunately, that song was never released. My friends, producers, Dre and Vidal, who did a lot of work with him, they didn't complete that album. Had that song been released, I was promised I would have had the spot playing on tour, but never happened. Got close, so.
That would be a trip if, the Eagles are in the Super Bowl. All of a sudden, Usher's in the middle of his set. And then all of a sudden the light shines on Frank May and he's on a didgeridoo.
Oh my gosh, that would be wild. The biggest act I ever had playing didgeridoo was with Weezer. I had a chance to play the didgeridoo with Weezer.
One of my all-time favorites. All right, so I know we're gonna get way off track here. So actually, that I said that was my last question, but since you brought up, being on tour, all this stuff, your music and everything, do you ever kind of cross the streams a little bit and you're playing music one night and you're maybe it's a late night, you come home, you have a listing appointment the next day. Did you ever go to a listing appointment with, say, like leather pants on with a button down shirt? Like, how does that work?
First of all, I've never worn leather pants. The most wild pair of pants I have is a turquoise pair of jeans. I like the energy of wearing turquoise colors, but you know what? I think the where all this crosses over is, what I learned performing, especially with my own group, and how to read the room and to, adjust and adapt. If a certain song wasn't going over, I'm like pulling the plug, giving the signal to the guys, and we're going into something that's more accessible to the audience. So where it crossed over is learning how to read the room, learning how to adapt to what I'm dealing with. I still feel in my heart I'm an artistic person, and I get to bring creativity to everything I do. Just waking up and being is creating. You're creating stuff every day, whether you're doing it consciously or subconsciously or unconsciously. So I'm very fortunate that in my line of work now, I get to share my energy with other people, try to be creative in how I do that. And I just want to make everybody's trip a little bit better at the end of the day. So,
Frank, it was great talking to you and having you on today. This was a trip for, the past 45 minutes. And I know we went a little bit long. I know we talked, we're trying to keep it to a certain time frame. We're just over that time frame, but it was great talking to you. Great to get to know you a little bit further. I know we know each other a little bit. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you doing this.
I really respect what you're doing, how hard you're working, and what you're doing to improve the lives of so many other people with the reach that your podcast has. It's been an honor and a privilege, Jason.
Thanks, Frank. I really appreciate it. Well, I hope to see you soon in person somewhere. I'm sure our paths will cross again very shortly, but have a great day, and I'll let you get back to it.
Many thanks. Take care.
That was the conversation with Frank May this week. He has a very unique perspective on things. Here are a few takeaways that I had in speaking with Frank. Number one, it is always very important to be mindful of what you're doing. Sometimes I feel as realtors, we go too fast. We have a tendency to go from one problem to the next and not really be mindful of what it may be costing us in our approach, in our sanity, in our time, all these things that we need to consider. One thing I noticed about Frank is that he is very deliberate when he speaks. You can tell that he is thinking and he is thoughtful. He has a very mindful approach to the way that he does things. And you can tell that that brings Frank a sense of peace, and that comes with practice. That is not just something that happens overnight. So the next time you feel a little frantic, try and slow down a bit if you can. Take a break for a little while and take your internal temperature before moving on to the next task. Be aware, be a little more deliberate, and that should help you to stay grounded. Number two, I love that Frank is always looking to grow, and that's a big thing with me. I mentioned in the podcast that I strive to be better every day, and that 1% approach to your day, right? Be 1% better today than you were yesterday will help you formulate good habits in order to reach that next level in your life. And that could be business-wise, that could be personal-wise, spiritual-wise, whatever is important to you in your life at the present moment. Challenge yourself to grow, take it to heart, and make that commitment every day when you wake up, and you're going to be better for it. Last but not least, I really respect that Frank is constantly learning. He has that curiosity to seek knowledge. And you can tell in this podcast that he is excited to share that knowledge with other people, share what he has learned. As you all know, I tend to listen to a lot of podcasts, and that's one way that I can increase my knowledge base and be curious about the subjects that I'm very interested in. So if this episode speaks to you, get into some of the books that Frank has mentioned if you haven't read them yet. They're a terrific place to start and get curious. Well, that's it for the podcast this week. We will be back in another couple of weeks with a new topic, a new guest, and as always, if you want to hear something that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to me, jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. And if you haven't liked and subscribed to the podcast or left us a review yet, please do so. It helps us to reach more people. Once again, this is Jason Ostrowski saying stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast.